and probably of him personally. So he has to keep going.
Year 2, no end in sight. Streaming now.
Hello and a very good morning to all News9 viewers. I'm Neha Bhan. We continue to bring you the latest from battleground Israel. In the latest, tens of thousands of people in Gaza have moved in a southern direction to seek refuge following Israel's evacuation warning. Now, the Israeli Defense Forces have carried out localized raids in the Gaza Strip. Do remember, both sides have suffered heavy casualties. Over 1,300 Israelis have been killed so far, while over 1,900 Palestinians have lost their lives. Right on your screens, today marks exactly a week since an unprovoked war was started by the Hamas terrorists. Now, the Israeli Defense Forces conducting, their operations, and Hamas has told people to ignore the evacuation order. The Israeli Defense Forces have carried out localized raids, and their Operation Ajay also has successfully brought back second batch of stranded Indian nationals from Israel. That's the latest on day 8. If we have to sum it up for all our viewers who have just joined in, over 1,300 Israelis have been killed so far, while over 1,900 Palestinians have lost their lives. In fact, the Israeli Defense Forces have carried out localized raids in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Forces have confirmed that they carried out localized raids over the past 24 hours in the Gaza Strip. This came ahead of an anticipated ground offensive in the war-hit region of Gaza. A statement from the IDF stated, over the past 24 hours, IDF forces carried out localized raids inside the territory of the Gaza Strip to complete the effort to cleanse the area of terrorists and weaponry. During these operations, there were also an effort to locate missing persons. That's what the statement read. It is important to note that Hamas has taken several Israeli forces hostage and is using them to deter Israeli attacks on Gaza. Despite this, Israeli forces have continued their operations to respond to the Palestinian terrorist organization Hamas. This was another attempt made by the Israeli forces to rescue hostages. This war was initiated by Hamas, and today marks a week since an unprecedented assault was launched on the people of southern Israel after Hamas fired thousands of rockets into the Israeli territory, sparking an unprovoked war. It has been started by Hamas, but the Israeli Defense Forces are on the ground, and the Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that it will be, in fact, the Israel that will end the war. We continue to stress that every country has all the right to defend its territory. It was an unprovoked war started by the Hamas, but it will certainly be ended by the Israel. Israel has launched numerous counter-offensives in Gaza, where many Hamas terrorists have sought shelter. The Hamas terrorists have carried out brutal attacks against the people of Israel, sparing not even the youngest children, not even the babies. There have been several such videos, gruesome videos, which have gone viral on social media, showing the kind of extent, the kind of measures that the Hamas terrorists have resorted to, sparing not even the babies. They've even beheaded the babies, according to reports. And here now, the Israeli Defense Forces have carried out localized raids over the past 24 hours, even as deadline for Gaza residents to evacuate is set to end. Do remember that reports are stating that there are numerous people, tens of thousands of people in Gaza who have fled south, who have fled their homes to safety after Israel's evacuation warning, even though Hamas has told the people living in Gaza to not pay heed to the evacuation warnings. Reports suggest that over 4 lakh Palestinians were already internally displaced even before the evacuation order. Do remember that the Israeli military has asked about 1.1 million people living in northern Gaza to evacuate to the south ahead of an expected ground invasion. Do remember that the Gaza Strip is occupied by over 2 million Palestinians living in an extremely cramped condition. It's not going to be easy for these people to live in large numbers, given they will have very limited places to go to. This means that a large number of Gaza citizens will be trapped in the city if Israel commences a ground invasion. Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip on Friday since Hamas fighters rampaged through southern Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a campaign of retaliation had only just begun.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was, quote, striking at our enemies with unprecedented might on Friday, and emphasized that, quote, this is just the beginning. Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip Friday and vowed to annihilate Hamas after its fighters stormed through towns and villages in southern Israel last week, killing 1,300 Israelis, mainly civilians, and making off with scores of hostages. Netanyahu added, our enemies have only begun paying the price, and I won't detail what is yet to come. So far, troops backed by tanks have mounted raids to attack Palestinian rocket crews and sought information about the location of hostages, according to an Israeli military spokesperson. This follows airstrikes that Gaza authorities say killed nearly 2,000 people. On Friday, Israel gave more than 1 million residents of the northern half of Gaza 24 hours to flee to the south to avoid an onslaught. Hamas vowed to fight to the last drop of blood and told residents to stay.
The situation in Gaza has reached a dangerous new low.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of a disaster if so many people were forced to flee, and said the siege of the enclave should be lifted to let in aid.
We need immediate humanitarian access throughout Gaza so that we can get fuel, food and water to everyone in need. Even wars have rules.
Earlier, a UN spokesperson said it would be impossible for Gazans to obey Israel's relocation order without devastating humanitarian consequences. Israel responded that the UN should condemn Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. Tens of thousands are estimated to have fled south in Gaza after the notice to evacuate, the UN said Friday. Gaza authorities said 70 people were killed and 200 were wounded when Israel struck cars and trucks carrying people fleeing. Reuters could not independently verify the reported incident.
Moving on now, at least 1 journalist has been killed and 6 others have been injured. This includes 2 Al Jazeera reporters in shelling by Israeli forces in southern Lebanon, according to witnesses at the scene. The Reuters news agency confirmed on Friday that Issam Abdullah, a videographer, was killed in the attack. Right on your screens, visuals of the Reuters young journalist who has unfortunately been killed. There is no update as to what is the state of the 6 others who have been injured, but we do wish for their speedy recovery. The group of journalists, including from Al Jazeera and AFP, were working near Alma al-Sahab, close to the Israel border, where the Israeli military and Lebanese militia Hezbollah have been trading fire in border clashes. 1 journalist has been killed, 6 others have been injured. This includes 2 Al Jazeera reporters in shelling by Israeli forces in southern Lebanon. Now, this is what was shared by various witnesses with some of the news agencies. The Reuters news agency has also confirmed that Isam Abdullah, a videographer, was killed in the attack. Quite unfortunate, in fact, piece of information they're coming in light. As I have been stressing, that civilian casualties cannot be avoided. Civilian casualties in such cases are simply unavoidable. But as a fellow journalist, it does break your heart to report that a journalist who was just doing his job has lost his life and 6 others have been injured. Moving on now, amid the war between Israel and the Palestinian militant terrorist group Hamas, another batch of stranded Indians were brought back to India on Saturday as part of the country's ongoing repatriation mission, Operation Ajay. The special chartered flight with the second batch of 235 Indian nationals, including 2 infants, took off from Israel at around 11:02 p.m. and they have now successfully landed in India. Do remember that there are around 18,000 Indians in Israel, and the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has categorically stated that whoever wants to return, their return will be facilitated by India, and the government will ensure the safe return of Indians. These people who in fact boarded a chartered flight were also seen raising Vande Mataram slogans. Many of these people who arrived in India also spoke with the media. Let's listen in.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Government of India, Operation Ajay, the whole team and the team IGCI for helping us taking our homeland safely. Thank you so much.
पिछले 2 साल से इजराइल में रह रहा हूँ और सब कुछ वहाँ अच्छा ही था. लास्ट 2 वीक्स बहुत ही बेकार गया हमारा, बट अभी सब कुछ अच्छा है. हम यहाँ अपने देश में आ गए वापस. अब हमें अच्छा लग रहा है.
ये तो बहुत अच्छा मूवी है. मैं इसके लिए धन्यवाद भी मैं करता हूँ गवर्नमेंट को भी, और जो भी हमारे प्राइम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदी जी हैं उनको भी, और विदेश मंत्री और इजराइल एम्बेसी को मैं सबको धन्यवाद देता हूँ. इट्स वंडरफुल एंड वी आर वेरी हैप्पी फॉर द इनिशिएटिव एंड मेनी थैंक्स टू मिनिस्टर ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स डॉक्टर जयशंकर, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया. सो जय हिंद.
The streets of Gaza City looked desolated on Friday, with abandoned cars, scattered debris and destroyed building facades as Israel's military called for civilians to relocate south within 24 hours ahead of an expected ground invasion. Blasts from airstrikes continued to ring out over the city of more than 1 million people, and dark plumes of smoke rose across the skyline as Israeli warplanes continued pounding Gaza in retaliation for the weekend attacks by Hamas terrorists that killed more than 1,300 Israelis. The bombardment of Gaza Strip, home to 2.3 million people, has left more than 1,500 Palestinians dead. The Israeli military said it would operate significantly in Gaza City in the coming days, and civilians would only be able to return when another announcement was made. Do remember that Israel has vowed to retaliate to annihilate the Hamas terrorist group, which led the attacks on Saturday on the 7th of October. Today is the 8th day, and Israel has vowed to teach Hamas a befitting lesson.
بس دبلوماسي معاه
اكيد.
A ground invasion of Gaza seems imminent. But this will not be the first time that Israel will be invading Gaza. Israel first invaded Gaza in 2009 and then again in 2014. My colleague Kartikeya Sharma tells you more about the previous assaults on Gaza.
Let me take you through those three occasions. Israel has invaded Gaza twice. And both two invasions, when they got inside Gaza, they differed. The strategic objectives were different. The first operation was called Operation Cast Lead. Then, second operation was called Protective Edge, and the Cast Lead differed from the Protective Edge operation. Operation Cast Lead was executed in 2009 with very different set of objectives. Operation Protective Edge was executed in 2014. Current operation is giving less advance warning to the civilians, which is different from the earlier operations, and I'll tell you what is the advance warning. No roof knocks given this time. Aditya, roof knocks, would you like to explain the roof knocks?
Well, usually what happens is that every time, Kartikeya, there is an airstrike and a particular target is chosen, there is different ammunition that is used. There are, of course, precision strike missiles, rockets that they have. They can strike a particular window, they can strike a particular floor, and there are various examples in the last few days as well. Roof knock is basically, every time there's an airstrike, they, before doing that airstrike, put ammunition on the roof of that particular building, which is harmless. Correct. It will not cause casualties, and it will be an alarm. It will be a warning for the civilians there. You leave immediately before the airstrike is coming.
So generally roof knock can have 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It entirely depends on the Israeli forces. So there are no roof knocks given this time. The bombs are just coming in. Earlier it would give civilians 10 to 15 minutes to leave, but now they are not giving any roof knocks. One option, because now we are discussing Gaza, is shallow incursion of 2014. So 2014 was a shallow incursion. IDF captured border areas close to tunnels in 2014. They shut them. The whole idea was to prepare a subterranean wall and flush out Hamas and seal those tunnels. That is why it was shallow. The deep operation took place in 2009, Operation Cast Lead. They went inside Gaza. They killed terrorists inside. It was a deeper operation. Now the issue is, right now the difficulty is that Hamas is deeply embedded in Gaza. They're embedded everywhere, and Hamas is embedded in schools. I'm sorry to say that's the reality. And I'm sorry to say that's the reality that they're embedded in mosques. And I'm sorry to say that Hamas, it's a reality that they're embedded in charities. No one is going to say schools can be radicals. Mosques and religion have nothing per se originally to do with radicalization, and charities also, but all of them are embedded by Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Now the question is, has Hamas turned into another ISIS? That's the question. And has Hamas radicalized the entire Gaza Strip the way Mosul and areas of Syria like Idlib have been radicalized, so civil society sustains terrorism? Can Israel repeat Operation Cast Lead? That's the question. 360,000 reservists have been mobilized. Can Israel dissect Gaza into two? But northern borders are vulnerable. Towns have been evacuated. As I said, northern towns have been evacuated because of the threat from the Hezbollah. Iron Dome can also run out of missiles in a long war. It is a 3-layer system. The first layer is Iron Dome, the second layer is the sling, and the third is arrow. But after the win, the question is who will administer the territory? Isn't it, Aditya? That's the real question. You can get these terrorists, but then who governs? Because ultimately, even Israel would want a wasteland. Even Israel would want a wasteland. Ultimately, it's also about international positioning, perception. And why this question will be reserved for all my guests. Why Netanyahu has been cautious in using military. And Israel's response can be disproportionate, like 9/12. You would be very surprised that I am using this word. I'll tell you why I'm using this word. When 9/11 took place, people said what America thought of going after Al-Qaeda on 9/10 was very different from what America decided to do on 9/12. Because what happened on 9/11 changed the psyche of the American administration. So, the terror attack on Israel has changed the psyche of the Israeli state. So what they thought of doing with Hamas a day before Hamas terrorists went inside Israel is completely different from what Israel now think of Hamas. So this is the reason I have used the word 9/12. The date is not important, it's the psyche which was created after 9/11. And that's the most important thing. And this is the Gaza Strip. So the issue is, can they cut Gaza into two? Can they cut Gaza into two? Will they only go to the Gaza city? What about North Gaza? Deir Balah, Khan Yunis, Rafah? It's a densely packed area. 40% of the population is below 15 years. There are 5,000 to 7,000, maybe 10,000 terrorists inside, but you have 23 lakh people in Gaza. 23 lakh people. They might be radicalized, but all of them might not be terrorists. So that's the dilemma. That's the preparation.
Moving on now, incoming rocket sirens are sounding in Tel Aviv and surrounding suburbs as well as in the southern coastal city of Ashdod. Now, there are no immediate reports of injuries or damage in the latest rocket barrage from the Gaza Strip. As the sirens wailed, residents sought shelter, anxiously awaiting the outcome of the attack. Immediate reports of injuries or damage resulting from this particular rocket assault. However, the repeated incidents of rocket fire have instilled fear and uncertainty among the residents of Tel Aviv and Ashdod. There you can see people running from helter-skelter to ensure they at least reach a place where they could be safe from the rocket assault that was launched by the Hamas terrorists. There have been no immediate reports of injuries or damage resulting from this particular rocket assault. However, such repeated incidents have instilled fear and uncertainty among the residents. In a statement regarding the escalating situation in Israel, United States President Joe Biden expressed deep concern and sorrow over the horrifying attack that has resulted in the loss of more than 1,000 innocent lives, including at least 27 Americans. He condemned the perpetrators, stating that they make even extremist groups like Al-Qaeda appear relatively restrained, characterizing them as pure evil. Let's listen in to what the United States President had to say on the current situation.
I also want to say a word about the situation in Israel. The more we learn about the attack, the more horrifying it becomes. More than 1,000 innocent lives lost, including at least 27 Americans. These guys make Al-Qaeda look pure. They're pure evil. As I said from the beginning, the United States, make no mistake about it, stands with Israel. The United States stands with Israel. Secretary of State Blinken was in Israel yesterday, and Secretary of Defense Austin is there today. We're making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself and respond to these attacks. It's also a priority for me to urgently address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. At my direction, our teams are working in the region, including communicating directly with the governments of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations and the United Nations to surge support and humanitarian consequences for Hamas attack to help Israel. You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well. This morning, I spoke with the family members of all those Americans who are still unaccounted for on a Zoom call for about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. They're going through agony, not knowing what the status of their sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children are. You know, it's gut-wrenching. I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families. We're working round the clock to secure the release of Americans held by Hamas in close cooperation with Israel and our partners around the region. We're not going to stop till we bring them home.
The president underlined the unwavering support of the United States for Israel, emphasizing that both Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, have been actively engaging with Israeli officials to ensure that they have necessary resources to defend themselves and respond to these attacks. Furthermore, President Biden has also recognized the urgent need to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. He disclosed that his administration's teams are actively working in the region and are in direct communication with various governments, including Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations, as well as the United Nations. Now, their collective goal is to provide support and address the humanitarian consequences of the Hamas's attack while assisting Israel in these challenging times. We move on now. Palestinian youth clashed with the Israeli military near Ramallah on Friday, hurling stones, flipping cars and setting tires on fire to block roads. According to reports, Israeli security forces killed 9 Palestinians and wounded dozens in confrontations across the West Bank, the Palestinian Health Ministry has said, as people marched in solidarity with Gaza. In Hebron, mourners attended the funeral of a Palestinian man who was killed by the Israeli forces in the West Bank city. Relatives and friends were seen bidding farewell to the man ahead of his burial. By Friday afternoon, Palestinian fighters were still engaged in gunfights with Israeli soldiers in different areas of the Palestinian territory, where the Palestinian Authority exercises limited self-rule. Palestinian youth clashed with the Israeli military near Ramallah. They were seen indulging in stone pelting. They also flipped cars and set tires on fire in a bid to block roads. The Palestinian ministry has claimed that Israeli security forces has killed 9 Palestinians and wounded dozens in confrontations across the West Bank. That's the health ministry. That's a claim made by the health ministry. People continue to march in solidarity with Gaza. In Hebron, there was another incident where people were seen mourning the death of a Palestinian man who was killed by Israeli forces in the West Bank. Dozens of cars seen leaving Khan Yunis as Israel instructs residents to flee south. Dozens of cars, in fact, were seen leaving the Khan Yunis as Israel has instructed residents to flee south. To evacuate, the Israel's military called for all civilians of Gaza City, more than 1 million people, to relocate south within 24 hours as it amassed tanks for an expected ground invasion in response to a devastating attack by the terrorist group Hamas. The United Nations has also stated evacuating everyone was impossible with power supplies cut and food and water in the Palestinian enclave running short after a week of retaliatory airstrikes and a full Israeli blockade. Palestinians in southern and central areas of the enclave where people were expected to flee to, in fact, said airstrikes had hit there overnight, with central parts also hit on Friday morning. There was no immediate comment from Israel in this regard. The UN Humanitarian Office said more than 4 lakh people had fled their homes in Gaza and 23 aid workers had been killed. Mass displacement continues, it stated. People in Gaza have been asked to relocate by the Israeli forces. They've been asked to flee south. The Israeli military has asked civilians of the Gaza city, more than 1 million people, to relocate south within 24 hours as it is all set for a ground invasion. Moving on, we have an important update on the ongoing conflict in the region by the IDF spokesperson Jonathan Conricus, who is providing a situational update on the war against Hamas. Let's hear what he has to say.
And its surroundings to move north, to move south and evacuate themselves to this place here, the Gaza River, in order to be safer and in order to not be in an area where we are going to enhance our military operations. We use the words significant military operations. We do this, we advertised our intentions in advance, not because it has any military logic, it doesn't, because we want civilians not to be affected by the war. We didn't put those civilians there. They are not our enemy. We are not trying to kill or injure any civilians. We are fighting against Hamas. That needs to be abundantly clear. We are fighting and targeting Hamas and its military infrastructure. Wherever it is, that's where we target it, and we have targeted around the Gaza Strip and in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. We have seen a significant movement of Palestinian civilians towards the south, and that's all over the news. We have seen people listening to our warning, understanding that they are doing the clever thing, moving out of a dangerous area, and that they are doing the right thing for their family and their own safety. Extremely sad and worrying to see is the fact that Hamas actively undermines and has tried to stop Palestinian civilians from evacuating that area, both via messages and also checkpoints and stops on the ground, according to reports made by international media. That, I think, is the peak of cynicism, the fact that Hamas not only holds civilians as their human shields, not only does Hamas embed itself within the civilian population and tries to use them as a disguise, not only do they hide their infrastructure underneath the civilian infrastructure, not all of those things combined, and also when we ask the civilians to evacuate, Hamas tries to stop it. Hopefully Palestinians will do that as fast as possible, vacate the area for their own security, and return only when we tell them that it is safe to do so. Around the Gaza Strip, as have been for many days, are Israeli reserve soldiers in formation that are getting ready for the next stage of operations. They are all around the Gaza Strip, in the south, in the center, and in the north, and they are preparing themselves for whatever target they will get, whatever task. As I've said before, our aim is very clear. The end state of this war is that we will dismantle Hamas and its military capabilities and fundamentally change the situation so that Hamas never again has the ability to inflict any damage on Israeli civilians or soldiers. Moving on to the northern front, after a few days that were a little bit quieter, I'd like to focus on an event that happened in the western sector of the border, in this area here. Hezbollah fighters fired an anti-tank missile towards Israeli troops. There was a short battle, and the situation eventually calmed down. Afterwards, Hezbollah sent drones into Israel and also fired surface-to-air missiles against an Israeli aircraft.
Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip on Friday since Hamas fighters rampaged through southern Israel, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said a campaign of retaliation had only just begun.
אנחנו הולמים באויבינו בעוצמה חסרת תקדים.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was, quote, striking at our enemies with unprecedented might on Friday, and emphasized that, quote, this is just the beginning. Israeli infantry made their first raids into the Gaza Strip Friday and vowed to annihilate Hamas after its fighters stormed through towns and villages in southern Israel last week, killing 1,300 Israelis, mainly civilians, and making off with scores of hostages. Netanyahu added, our enemies have only begun paying the price, and I won't detail what is yet to come. So far, troops backed by tanks have mounted raids to attack Palestinian rocket crews and sought information about the location of hostages, according to an Israeli military spokesperson. This follows airstrikes that Gaza authorities say killed nearly 2,000 people. On Friday, Israel gave more than 1 million residents of the northern half of Gaza 24 hours to flee to the south to avoid an onslaught. Hamas vowed to fight to the last drop of blood and told residents to stay.
The situation in Gaza has reached a dangerous new low.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of a disaster if so many people were forced to flee, and said the siege of the enclave should be lifted to let in aid.
We need immediate humanitarian access throughout Gaza so that we can get fuel, food and water to everyone in need. Even wars have rules.
Earlier, a UN spokesperson said it would be impossible for Gazans to obey Israel's relocation order without devastating humanitarian consequences. Israel responded that the UN should condemn Hamas and support Israel's right to self-defense. Tens of thousands are estimated to have fled south in Gaza after the notice to evacuate, the UN said Friday. Gaza authorities said 70 people were killed and 200 were wounded when Israel struck cars and trucks carrying people fleeing. Reuters could not independently verify the reported incident.
My colleague Neha Khanna spoke to Bushra Khalidi, who is the Palestinian policy lead at Oxfam, and asked her about the situation in Gaza. Take a look.
We are now joined by Bushra Khalidi. She is a Palestinian woman. She works as policy lead at Oxfam, and she joins us live now from the West Bank. Bushra, this is a very difficult time for the people of Israel as well as for the Palestinians. Thank you very much for joining us at a time like this. If you could begin by telling us what the situation is like where you are in the West Bank. Are things relatively normal there? And then if you could give us a sense of how devastating the last few days of airstrikes have been in Gaza. I believe many of your colleagues who were in Gaza currently are either missing or have not been heard from in a while. Please give us a sense of what's happening on the ground.
Thank you for having me. The situation in the West Bank is not normal. Actually, the situation in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza is never normal. We've been living under 57 years of military occupation, and in Gaza, a 16-year-old illegal blockade, and that is far from normal. The situation is catastrophic. In the West Bank, we are under full lockdown imposed by Israel since Sunday. There are about 640 checkpoints across the West Bank, closing all cities, entries and exit to cities, so we cannot leave Ramallah. We can't travel between cities. We can't visit our families that live in different towns or villages or nearby towns. There have been today only 40 incidents of settler violence reported to the West Bank Protection Consortium. Today, 3 communities in the West Bank were forcibly displaced. I mean, this amounts to annexation of the West Bank. We have heard that there are WhatsApp groups where there have been calls to arm civilian settlers in the West Bank and basically shoot to kill any Palestinian they see. The messages and the text messages that have been shared across different settler outposts are frightening. I mean, we're not leaving our homes. We're not traveling on roads that we share with settlers because there has been already up to now over 20 killed in the West Bank since Saturday. This year has been the most devastating year for West Bank Palestinians, with the record number of fatalities of Palestinians killed by either settlers or armed forces, Israeli forces. In Gaza, I've been on calls to colleagues and my in-laws, and every single time I am trying to share this message with the world, I choke up because of imagining the situation that they're in. I'm desperately waiting for the 2 ticks on WhatsApp to appear so that I can assume that their phone is on and that they're alive. Every time I've spoken to them, they've said that the bombardments have been constant, that they've been the bloodiest, that they've been the most destructive. I've just got a notification from a colleague who is stuck in Rafah. Rafah was bombarded 2 days ago completely. He's sleeping on the street in camps, and he can't reach his family in the middle of the city in Gaza, and he's desperate to go and meet them. We have 5 colleagues that have completely lost their homes. We've asked them to share with us videos and signs of life. It's harrowing. They don't have water. They don't have electricity. There's no internet. There's no phone lines. If we are able to get through to them, it's because they are able to get some internet or some electricity somewhere to charge quickly their phones and call their loved ones and just make sure that we're okay. So right now we're focusing, of course, on locating all of our staff, but it's been a very complicated exercise to do this. As you said in your report, the hospital is threatening to shut its operations in the next couple of days, and you rightly said it is going to be a morgue, a mass cemetery. Food supplies are dwindling. Wastewater treatment plants are not operating. There's raw sewage being poured into the sea, actually Olympic pool size of raw sewage. The fear now is that this sewage is going to be basically overflow inside into the city, into Gaza.
That's all we have in this edition of the Bulletin. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day ahead.
China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemies. This and more. Streaming on the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
ह्यूमैनिटेरियन कर रहे हैं, जो कि सभी लोग कर रहे हैं।
Coaching is now starting from grade 3, 4, 5, 6.
होता जाने वाली बीच राह में आधे टेस्ट देके हैं सिलेक्शन की चाह में।
ऑल इंडिया का बच्चा कोटा जाता है।
This rat race is for rats, not for humans. So why should we even be a part of it?
The Rat Race. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now. BrahMos. Stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China's navy has threatened its neighbors, and they are turning to the BrahMos for protection. The warship killer. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
We are right now at the place where the gunfight between the IDF and the Hamas militants took place. I just want to show you what exactly and how massive the fight is, because these are the, I'm very near to the, especially to the Gaza Strip, and this is around 3 to 4 kilometers from this, and I can then show you how exactly the Hamas militants have entered. Right behind me, this is the car which they have generally used when the Hamas militants entered, and you can see, my camera person can show you exactly the bullets. You can see the bullets in the car, you can see the manuals, you can see the books of Hamas militant which are they using. This is the vehicle they have been using to enter at the various locations, and they have been using RPGs, they have been using gun machines. And when IDF came into these locations, they first neutralized and they captured all these vehicles. You can see the bullet marks on the on all these vehicles, because when the encounter took place between both the parties, they have been neutralized. And you can see how well planned and they have well executed this, because the Hamas have a big plan, because they have come with a lot of water, the dry foods, the ratio, the food to eat. And you can see this is the RPG shells, these are the water bottles, they are the cutters they have been using to cut the wires, and especially the dry foods they have been using. You can see these are the dates which generally these countries have very common, but when I asked them, these are the water bottles which are available in the Gaza only. So this is not things which are available in the Israel. And you can see the glucose bottles, the ORS, the medical kit. You can see these are they have came with a very well planned things. This is the bandages, they have the water bottles, sanitizers, injections, syringe. So they have a very well plan. They wanted to come to this location, they wanted to neutralize, they wanted to hold up all these locations for a very long period. But the point is, they don't get that much of support from their from the back, so that they are not able to sustain for long. And you can see these are the multiple vehicles we have been targeted by the IDF, and they have captured all these vehicles. सेड्रॉट में यहाँ इस समय जहाँ पर अटैक हुआ है, उस घर के लोगों को यहाँ से निकाला जा रहा है। देखिए, एक बुजुर्ग महिला को, सीनियर सिटीजन को यहाँ से निकाला जा रहा है। उनके पैर में भी शायद चोट लगी है, उनके पैर में भी। और देखिए, यहाँ से लोगों को हटाया जा रहा है। यहाँ पे अब से कुछ मिनटों पे जब हम यहाँ मौजूद थे, तब ये अटैक हुआ। पूरे घर में आग लगी हुई है। लगातार जो फायर ब्रिगेड्स हैं वो यहाँ पर मौजूद है, वो लगातार यहाँ मौजूद है। आग पर काबू पाने का काम किया जा रहा है। कई जगहों पर सेड्रॉट के अंदर इस तरीके से अटैक हुए हैं। फोर्सेस यहाँ ऑन ग्राउंड है, और लेकिन ख़ास बात यह कि अभी भी यहाँ पर रह कर अटैक किए जा रहे हैं। और यहीं से बेहद करीब गाज़ा पट्टी है, जहाँ पर बम्बारमेंट की जा रही थी, लेकिन उसी बीच हमास की तरफ से लगातार ये रॉकेट दागे गए। और देखिए, अब हम यहाँ पे आपको बता रहे हैं कि किस तरीके से अभी यहाँ से लोगों को यहाँ से लगाया जा रहा है। कुछ लोगों को चोटें भी आई हैं। यहाँ पर मैं आपको अपने कैमरा पर्सन के साथ चल के दिखाता हूँ कि देखिए, अभी यहाँ पर इस घर में योजा के शेल गिरा है। और महत्वपूर्ण यह है कि ना सिर्फ यहाँ पर, बल्कि देखिए वहाँ पर भी काफ़ी ज़्यादा डैमेजेस हुए हैं। और देखिए, मैं आपको लगातार सेड्रॉट के इलाके में हूँ, जहाँ पर ये अटैक हुए हैं। और देखिए, लगातार अभी अगर आप देख रहे हो कि आपको नज़र आएगा कि कई गाड़ियों को डैमेजेस हुए हैं, कई शेल्स जो हैं कई रॉकेट जो है यहाँ पर आकर गिरे हैं। वो अगर आप देखिए तो आपको शेल्स के स्प्लिंटर्स जो हैं वो आपको नज़र आ जाएंगे। और ये ऐसा हर दूसरी जगहों पर सेड्रॉट के इलाके में हो रहा है और मैं इस समय सेड्रॉट में ही मौजूद हूँ। देखिए इस घर को भी काफ़ी ज़्यादा नुकसान पहुँचा है और उस घर में जो अगर आप आगे देख रहे हो तब वहाँ पर लगातार उस घर में आग लगी है, जहाँ पर फायर ब्रिगेड्स की जो गाड़ियाँ हैं, जो फायर टेंडर्स, वो लगातार उस पर काबू पाने का काम कर रहे हैं। और हम आपको TV9 भारतवर्ष आपको लगातार इन इलाकों से रिपोर्ट कर रहा है जो इस समय गाज़ा पट्टी के बहुत करीब है और यहाँ पर क्या सूरत हाल है ये आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। 2 लोग थे उस घर के अंदर जिनको चोटें आई हैं, जिनको ले जाया जा रहा था, एक बुजुर्ग महिला और एक और शख्स बताया जा रहा है जिसको वहाँ से हटाया जा रहा है। और अगर आप देखें कि अभी भी वहाँ पर काबू पाने का काम लगातार चल रहा है। देखिए सबसे पहले मैं कि आपको सेड्रॉट में दिखा देता हूँ जिस घर के अंदर कई घरों के अंदर यहाँ रॉकेट गिरे थे। और देखिए जिस घर में मैं आपको लेकर जा रहा हूँ ये वो घर है जहाँ पर अभी रॉकेट गिरा है, यानी यहाँ पर शेल अभी गिरा है। देखिए पीछे की तरफ इस इलाके से यहाँ पर ये शेल गिरा है। मेरे कैमरा पर्सन और मैं आपको दिखाएंगे, हम आपको अंदर भी लेकर जाएंगे घर में जहाँ पर हम अभी थोड़ी देर पहले यहाँ पहुँचे हैं। और देखिए यहाँ से अभी एक शेल आकर इनके इस एरिया के अंदर जाकर हिट किया, अगर मेरे कैमरा पर्सन आपको दिखा पा रहे हो। और यहाँ इस घर के अंदर कितना डैमेज हुआ है ये भी मैं आपको दिखा देता हूँ। देखिए क्योंकि सेड्रॉट वो इलाका है जो बहुत करीब है खास तौर पर इन इलाकों में, और हमारी कोशिश यही है। देखिए जब मैं आपसे बात कर रहा हूँ तब भी मुझे बम्बारमेंट की आवाज़ लगातार सुनाई दे रही है, लगातार यहाँ पर शेल फायर किए जा रहे हैं। और अब से थोड़ी देर पहले मल्टीपल रॉकेट्स आगे गए थे सेड्रॉट में और इसी वजह से सेड्रॉट के इन इलाकों के अंदर लगातार लोगों में दहशत है। देखिए इस घर के अंदर वो रॉकेट शेल आकर गिरे हैं और अभी क्योंकि हम जब इस घर में आए तो उसकी एम्यूनेशंस की स्मेल हम महसूस कर सकते हैं। देखिए यहाँ पर वो डैमेजेस हुए हैं इस घर के अंदर और ये लाइव डैमेजेस या फिर आप मैं कहता हूँ लाइव शेल मैं आपको दिखाता हूँ। देखिए ये है वो शेल्स जो लगातार इस जगहों पर आके पड़े हैं। देखिए ये आप देख पा रहे होंगे यही वो रॉकेट्स के शेल हैं जो इस घर को बर्बाद किया है। और अगर मेरे कैमरा पर्सन थोड़ा सा अंदर और आए और दिखाएं कि देखिए आपको नज़र आएगा कि वो तबाही की मंजर या फिर तबाही की जो तस्वीरें हम आपको दिखा रहे हैं बिल्कुल सेड्रॉट के इलाकों से, वो यही तस्वीरें हैं। और देखिए अगर आप दिखाएं कि क्या इस समय आलम है, किस तरीके से डैमेजेस हुए हैं, पूरा घर का पिछला हिस्सा तहस नहस हो गया है। और देखिए ये सेड्रॉट, और अगर आप देखें तो आपको धुआं नज़र आएगा, आपको एम्यूनिशन की स्मेल हम लोग यहाँ से महसूस कर सकते हैं क्योंकि बहुत ज़्यादा इन इलाकों को क्षति पहुँची है प्रतिमा। और देखिए हर इलाके में क्योंकि जो लोकल्स हैं वो इसलिए यहाँ दहशत में रहते हैं क्योंकि कभी भी यहाँ पर इस तरीके के अटैक हो जाते हैं। और देखिए लगातार मैं और मेरे कैमरा पर्सन निशान जो हैं वो इन इलाकों में घूम रहे हैं, ना सिर्फ सेड्रॉट के इलाकों में बल्कि आप कह सकते हैं कि जो दूसरे सदर्न इलाके हैं जहां पर सबसे पहले घुसपैठ की थी। और सेड्रॉट इसलिए इंपॉर्टेंट है क्योंकि यहीं पर मैं आपको बार बार बता रहा हूं कि सेड्रॉट में सबसे ज़्यादा इन्फिल्ट्रेशन पॉइंट से सबसे ज़्यादा घुसपैठ यहीं पर की थी। लोगों को स्टैंड पर, जो बस स्टैंड पर महिलाएं खड़ी थी 5-5, 6-6, उनको वहीं मार दिया गया, उनके गले काट दिए गए। जो मैस्केयर था, जो तबाही थी वो यहीं पर हुई और इसी के बाद उन्होंने इसी जगह के पुलिस स्टेशन को हॉस्टेज के तौर पर इस्तेमाल किया। तो देखिए हम लगातार सेड्रॉट के इलाकों में, और दूसरी तरफ जो आप मेरे से दूसरा सवाल आप पूछ रही थी कि देखिए अभी क्या हालात हैं खासतौर पर इन इलाकों में और किस तरीके से जो IDF ने कहा वो बिल्कुल सही कहा क्योंकि एक जो बर्बरता की गई शवों के साथ, लोगों के साथ, महिलाओं के साथ, वो निश्चित तौर पर डराने वाली है। और ये शायद हमास की कोशिश भी यही थी कि ऐसा कुछ किया जाए ताकि दहशत भर दी जाए इजराइल के लोगों में। लेकिन शायद इजराइल का एक कहते हैं कि उनका एक कॉन्सेप्ट है कि दे ऑलवेज बाउंस बैक। तो ये बाउंस बैक वाला जो सिचुएशन है या फिर जो अभी कंडीशन है वो इजराइल की है। और इजराइल इसलिए लगातार अभी गाजा पर ना सिर्फ अटैक कर रहा है बल्कि हमास के ऊपर भी ताबड़तोड़ हमले किए जा रहे हैं।
ChatGPT. It can generate codes and human-like responses through text, write stories, and do a lot more.
I work in a newsroom with anchors, researchers and scriptwriters, graphic artists, producers, video editors, camera crew. But does a newsroom really need them today?
All of us have to think about unique and distinctive value addition that cannot be automated or repeated or replaced by a machine.
ChatGPT may kill many companies.
A human has to be in the loop with an ability to control this.
Dark Side of the Boom. Streaming now.
know how many students left India last year? Take a wild guess. More than 7 lakh students. That's more than the population of a small state like Sikkim. These students spent more than 40,000 crore rupees on their education. That's more than 65 times the 600 crore budget of India's Chandrayaan 3 mission. So what